So I want to thank everybody for joining us for what promises to be, I'm going to say, our best build ever. For multiple reasons. We've been holding wonderful builds now for years, but this one is an outcome that I've long dreamt of, as I said in my newsletter today. So if you want to hear me get sappy, you can just subscribe to my newsletter. Preiss, CEO of Iasa, welcoming everybody to Whynde Takes Over Built, Women in Architecture. And this is, as you will know of me, I would rather hear these architects talk than, okay, never mind. I was going to say than talk myself, but I'll shut up now. So I thought we might get a little bit of an intro to three fantastic architects who I've known for many, many years before we got started talking about the upcoming Build Conference and the overall topic of women in architecture. So I wondered if we could just go around, maybe starting with Chris, or starting with Whynde. She's the chair of Build, of WIA. Start with Whynde, Chris, and then Linda, and then we can get started on maybe some discussions about women in architecture.
Perfect. Happy to. And Paul, I think we all share the specialness of this moment. And this build actually marks a year since we launched the global initiative WIA, or Women in Architecture. So a very special day, and all of us here on that leadership committee. So I'm Whynde Kuehn. My role is a longtime business architecture practitioner, thought leader, educator, really focusing on leveraging architecture within a strategy and transformation context, and also a co-founder of the Business Architecture Guild and author of a book called Strategy to Reality. So that's me.
So I'm Chris Cooper-Bland. Hello. I work for Endava, who are a systems integrator organization with, nearly 12,000 people now. I look after the architecture disciplines. I'm group head of architecture, and that means that I focus on developing the architecture skills within the organization. How do we have a common approach to architecture, making sure that we help people along the architectural journey, and we're doing the right things, and making sure that people get the right training around technology, for example. And also I get involved with client work, so I get to have some fun on some of our bigger accounts, particularly in the payment space.
Okay, and that leaves me, Linda Finley. Nice to see everyone. Currently enroll as chief architect for Cargill. I have about 500 architects across the globe, and also 150,000 or so people that work for Cargill, and of course, super large company no one knows anything about because it's private. So, but we make a lot of the things you eat. Almost everything, as a matter of fact, for everyone on the globe. Architecture is a real challenge in a company like that, and in a footprint like that. I have all responsibility for enterprise architecture in all the domains there. I also am the founder of the Twin Cities Business Architecture Forum. In 2009, stood that up, very focused on business architecture for a long time, along with Whynde. On the board for Business Architecture Guild, and one of the authors of the BizBoc. I'm very proud of that, standing up, being part of that standing up of that domain. That's where my heart is, but also data architecture, enterprise architecture, and all the other architecture things. So big fan of this professional space, and I'm super glad we're here and that you're here, and also couldn't be more delighted to be 1 year with WIA.
Well, thank you. I'm Paul Preiss. Like I said, the CEO and founder of Iasa. And Iasa is just the platform for architecture. We support everything from communities around the world to partnerships with government, universities, corporate members, the Chief Architect Forum. This is a wonderful panel, by the way, because this is the nexus point between Built, WIA, and the CAF, which is the Chief Architect Forum, headed by Grant Ecker, who you'll be hearing from later in the conference, and the leadership of WIA. I wanted to start our questions out today with just really statements, because women in architecture, diversity in architecture, is a complex story. And I wanted to just give each of the panelists who are chief architects and thought leaders and influencing the industry at just massive levels around the world, a chance to just make a statement about what we're here for, really. I wanted to get your thoughts on what is We Have about for you, and where do you see it going? What do you see its importance as? Why women in architecture? Whynde, obviously, that's, as the chair, I'd love to give you the first crack at that, and then maybe switch it around to Linda and then Chris.
You got it. Awesome. Well, the mission of WIA is to accelerate the pathway for women in architecture to amplify the impact of the discipline worldwide. So, we were very careful on when we were crafting this, right? And I do want to say that Women in Architecture is named after the mission, right? So it includes all of us, regardless of our genders, right? We all play a very important role in this. But for me, the why WIA is, as you all have said, I believe in the power of architecture, and I believe it's never been more important than it is at this juncture in our global connected world, right? Where we're trying to be sustainable. The things we do in technology and business models have a lot of impact on others. And so I feel like we really need more of us, right? And we need all of us to be at our best individually and together. And along with that, I'll just say that I believe in the power of diversity to build better solutions, to answer some of the greatest challenges of our time, and to also help with architecture as a discipline itself, to help make it more relevant and sort of resonate with more people as we continue to grow. So that's the why for me. And to your point, Paul, and where is it going? We really want to help architects today in the role to thrive and be impactful and successful, but we also want to build the pathway for people in schools, and that's girls and boys, right? We want to create this as a thriving and exciting profession for everybody.
So I've everything Whynde said, first of all, and so we're gonna be like principal building now, where I'm gonna assume all of her everything she said, and I'm gonna add to it, and I'm gonna add something pretty practical. That first of all, I'm really committed to the women in architecture. It's not just women architects; it's all of us, and we all have an obligation and responsibility to make this thing as this profession, the value delivered, as great as it can be, and therefore we need to be inclusive, period, and encouraging of inclusivity. We have a lot of talent in a lot of people, and we don't want barriers to getting that talent to where we need it. And I'm gonna give a practical example. Just even yesterday, as I said, I'm leading a very, very large architecture footprint. Don't even know, frankly. I mean, don't ask me what everyone's doing all the time. Obviously, we can't know that, but there's too many people. It's too global. But here's the thing: is I go into meetings and I am literally the only female. 30, 40, 50 people in a room, and it's I usually don't, my career has always been that way. I've always said, isn't it, I've always jokingly said it's handy to be a woman in IT, because when you go to a conference, there's never a line in the restroom, right? The line is at the men's room. But that's actually just bad. It's just bad. And I don't, it's not funny. It's bad, right? And I mean, I look around the room for even teams that I have hired, and they're still all men. Nothing wrong with that, except that where are the women? And I just really think it's just so important for us to make sure that women and everyone sees this path, this profession, this career as an opportunity and an option for them. I meet people all the time that are extraordinarily skilled and talented, natural architecture thinkers, absolutely would be brilliant in the role, and they just don't even consider it. For what reason? I don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out. And I think it's our obligation to do that as leaders in this space. So that's why I'm here. I want to make it better and not bad.
I'm going to struggle to say anything original after Whynde and Linda, to be honest. You know, I've had the same experience, been in a room with 20 architects and I'm the only woman. They assume I'm the project manager. Like, really? I haven't, well, yeah, haven't quite been asked to make the coffee, but you know, it's well along those lines. So yeah, we've got to move away from that. I mean, we should be past this. And how do we get past this? I think that's why I'm keen to participate in WEA and try and change these things. There is a difference in different geographies. The number of women going into IT generally, certainly in the UK, and I believe the US as well, is significantly lower than 50%. I work with people in Central Europe a lot, where the balance of university students taking IT courses, computer science courses, is much closer to 50% female. And we as an organization have a, you know, nearly 50% entry. And into developer roles, I'm not talking about traditional more female roles, maybe in analysis or project management, but you know, 50% of our entry level developers are women approximately. But then as you move into architecture, the number decreases rapidly. So it's not just, oh, there's not enough women in IT generally. There isn't, certainly in the UK and US, but there's really, really not enough women in IT and architecture. And it baffles me, to be honest, as to why women don't want to be in IT architecture. Because the skills required, just stakeholder management, multitasking, analyzing problems, managing complexity, you know, being persistent and seeing things through, communication skills, making sure people are really understanding what you're saying. These are traditionally, you know, skills that women are good at. So what's the barrier? And I have asked some of our staff who've decided against architecture or not considered it, because it's like, you'd be a great architect. Why didn't you go into architecture? As I think it was Linda said, they just didn't think of it. So it's beholden to all of us to encourage good people, good women, to follow the architecture profession, career, because it's just so interesting. It's so varied. You get to solve big problems and talk to all sorts of people. So that's why I want to support WEA and allow more women to get into architecture and benefit.
It amazes me that we can hear stories like that, that we can see those kind of facts. It isn't the person that I consider my biggest mentor throughout Iasa, throughout architecture in general, as a woman. She's amazing. It just doesn't make any sense to me. What are the barriers, in your opinion, to this transition, especially, I mean, in places where you see higher, what are the biggest barriers that we need to confront in WEA to seeing this transition, but from women in IT to architecture roles, or just in general to seeing it as the absolute destination career that it is? Is it a visibility thing? Is it a what are the things getting in our way, in your opinions?
Mhm.
Do we want to go around the room, or do we want to
Go ahead, Chris. Yeah, you got a thought there?
So there is a fear of technology, I think. There's a sort of a perception that you need to know everything about every single technology before you can become a solution architect, for example. And I don't want some men are better at bluffing than some women. I would say that's a bit of a trend. So there's that confidence to be able to say, okay, I might not know everything about this, but I can learn, and I have the skills to talk to the right people so that I can find out. I don't have to know everything. I just have to either know how to find it out or know who does know how to get that knowledge out to somebody else. So it's that being able to bring people together to solve the problem, and get that message across that you don't have to have all the answers as an architect. You need to bring people together to solve the problem.
If I, Whynde, you want to?
Go for it. Yeah.
Well, I'll just say on top of that a little bit, I think that one thing that we know for sure is that women, from whatever, I can't name the science or statistics on it right now, but I've read and heard, and we've talked about some things around women just in general as a gender tend to look at a job posting or something and need to be able to check every box before they apply for a job. And that is a behavior that we have on any job, apparently. And we all need to remember that any job description is written in some kind of a closet with some kind of dream. I mean, we've all done it, right? Ooh, what's my ideal here? They're writing the ideal. You need to understand that you probably have the foundation and the core strength to do a job and take a shot, even if you can't check every box on that job. And that's one thing I think. But the other thing that I was going to mention is something I think has happened in architecture. And I used to talk about this when I was teaching business architecture courses, when business architecture was just coming into the mix, is that enterprise architecture and the whole profession became very deeply technical. And so enterprise architects, where it was always supposed to be all the domains of architecture, including strong quadrant in business architecture, meaning business strategy, alignment, strategy to reality, all the things that Whynde and I especially talk about a lot, and others. But I think that it became quite technically oriented, and then maybe it just felt more like some women weren't prepared or maybe didn't want to get into it. I don't know. But architecture is very, very broad. And it's actually a way of thinking more than it is. And your skills are around thinking and relating and consultative and communication and strategic thread pulling to the reality and the activation and the execution of things, and a whole lot of stakeholder management. And so there are things I think that are pretty misunderstood about the role. And that's something I think that we really can try to tackle.
Love it. And Chris and Linda, I can only sort of echo, but when I think about why we have fewer women in architecture, I do think part of it is a function of, this funnel of why do we have fewer women in technology or even, business to some extent, right? Because that's funneling in. But, Chris, as you were saying too, it's the pathways into the role. And especially if the pathways into the role were heavily technical, then we're by default going to have fewer women. So, as both of you are saying, I think it's how do we make this role more attainable and emphasize all that it is so that we can have other pathways, including coming out of the business into the role. Part of the reason why I think the business architect role is a nice bridge into other architecture roles and other transformation roles. So that's part of it. Also, to say, I think the self-confidence, which is a real thing at the root of statistics, holding back women, and just that learning and growth mindset to say, listen, the technology changes all the time now. We're all learning. I can learn too. And the second big factor, I think, is just the perception of architecture. Linda, as you're saying, maybe it's got a technical perception, but it also has a little bit of this specialty, this sort of, maybe a little bit esoteric or unattainable. So I think that perception has maybe prevented some women from maybe being interested. But I also think it's the very thing that having more diversity in architecture can help us to improve overall.
Can I just say one thing, sort of following up on that, Wendy? I think the say the sort of the old school architect, particularly for sort of application and solution levels, maybe even enterprise, I'm not quite so sure, was that, well, I'm going to tell you how you're going to design and build your system. You go away and design and build your system that way. And to be honest, as you say, with the amount and change of technology, the likelihood of some use a some guy with grey hair knowing all the new technology is pretty low. So what do the team do? They go off and do their own thing. That's not how architecture works these days. You're about facilitating the team, being able to break down bridges, to get decisions sort of rippling through the organization, to reach consensus, stakeholder management, all those things. It's a different role now. And I think it's a role that's ideally suited to skills that women traditionally have.
Mhm. Agree.
Absolutely.
That led beautifully into, and this is just such a great panel. There's so many things I want to cover, right? What is the but what is that the parts of the job that you find are that women in general particularly are well adapted to? You've listed a few of them, Chris, but again, every woman in architecture I've met has been exceptional. So what is that? Not every, but in general. So what are the parts of the skills match there? What's that? If there are these challenges, why do women make such great architects? What are the components of our job that speak directly to that fit?
Listening skills. I think you've got to listen to the business, you've got to listen to the technology people, your developers, and then you've got to do a bit of a translation activity. So when you're talking to the business, you need to speak the language of business. What is it that's going to drive the decision making? Some people in the business may not care whether it's a NoSQL database or a graph database or whatever. They might not understand, but you need to be able to position that in a way that your business people can comprehend and help support the decision making process. So, this will allow you to be far more adaptable if you move into a new market space, for example. Just made that up on the fly. So, I think that's one of the sort of key skills that women can bring to the party as a strength.
Yeah, one of the things that I get uncomfortable with, despite my commitment and passion to this whole conversation and bringing more women into architecture, is when we have to call out one gender is better at something than another. And I'll just be candid about that. I think that although I think that there are all kinds of science and statistics and things that show that the genders are we do have some certain skill sets, and I think that we can talk about that, especially when we can find those references to real studies and stuff instead of just opinions. But here's the thing that I'd like to say is, if half the people are architecture thinkers, meaning, I mean, half the people, non-gender, right? And they're systems thinkers, they're high collaborators, they're abstract, they're contextual, because so if half the people are more literal and half the people are more, that connector type of personality, if that's how we're going to think about it, half of the women are not in architecture. I mean, let's just match, right? Let's just bring the people that are hiding in roles that maybe they'd be really great architects. Let's bring them forward. So if it's just a population question, I don't know if this is making sense, but if there's 20 people in a room, 20 men and 20 women, and 10 of the men are architects and doing that whole EA, killing it in EA and having the consulting skills and the listening skills and the stakeholder management skills and the connect the dots skills and all the things with technology, half the women can do the same thing, right? And at least let's get that half and then start talking about why women would be better at it. It's just we don't even have the ones that are already just sitting there. Does that make sense? And I want to get an equal, just some kind of a pathway for women to just realize that they'd be great at this. And it doesn't, not because they're women, but because they're who they are, right? And that's the first step. And then let's talk about why women are great at architecture. That's the next layer of the conversation. But and the message I would give, the coaching message I give people when they're like, oh, I just feel like an imposter, or I feel like I can't keep up, or I feel like I maybe shouldn't even be in that room. What I say is you know more about what you know than anyone on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Bring what you know, because I mean, there is no one that knows everything you do about whatever it is you're talking about. So it's a mindset shift. And I think we need to build that confidence for people. So I don't know if that made sense. I hope it did. It's the way I was thinking about it.
And a lot of men suffer from imposter syndrome as well.
Of course they do. And that's why it's so difficult to have this gender, clarifying conversation. It's just that we're all out there. Let's bring them forward, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think about it.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more too. I don't think anybody wants to draw any more lines. And it's about diversity of thought and perspectives, right? Again, maybe just a tiny backdrop in a different direction. There's a study I really like in a book called The Athena Doctrine. And they surveyed tons and tons and tons of people around the world. And they asked for characteristics of the modern leader. And interestingly enough, 8 out of those 10 characteristics are categorized as feminine. That doesn't mean they can show up in a man or woman, doesn't matter. But it's pertinent to this conversation that what we as a population around the world said modern leaders need are things like being future focused and bigger picture, and being collaborative and being flexible. So I think that just all plays into what you all are saying here perfectly around the communication, around the big picture and systemic thinking, around the connecting the dots, being outcome focused, right? This is not just needed in the architecture role. This is needed in all roles, right? Going forward.
I agree.
I think that's a function of everything becoming more complicated and needing more communication.
And connected.
And multitasking and complexity. I mean, we live in an incredibly complex world. And I tell the architects in our organization all the time, this is a hard job. This is a super hard job, because you got to pay attention to a lot of things. And you really have to be open to connecting. It's connecting all the time, but then don't try to connect so much stuff that you never move forward. So it's like keeping this balance, right? It's a hard job. And depending on especially how complex the organization is that you're working in. And I give credit all day long to how hard the job is, but it's damn rewarding. It's a fantastic job. It's the best job in the company. So
pulse of change, isn't it?
So I heard something in this that's obviously on the mind of a lot of sort of people thinking about diversity today, and that is the change in pronouns, in thinking about diversity itself, in identity, etc. How do you see that playing into our goals for WIA? How do you see us looking at diversity in architecture around the world? Especially as I think Linda really pointed it out best, where sometimes it's just people have the job and they've been in it for 100 years, and that's the kind of iconic representation. I mean, even the Matrix put it in as the old white guy, right? Was the architect, right? Look, I mean, so if Colonel Sanders is no longer the architect, right? How do we talk about diversity, specifically focusing on the traits that have been historically feminine, identified as feminine, but are in fact really something that every leader needs to learn, right? That this is more about skills and less about identifying jobs with with any sex or gender, recognized gender, in the sense that, if I learn to communicate emotionally, that doesn't make me more feminine, right? It makes me more aware and a better partner and a better employee and a better manager and a better, a friend. So how do you, I mean, I know that I don't want to balloon the topic up to gender equalities and multiple genders, except for to say, how do you think about teaching teaching this next generation and the world and helping the world to understand this as skills and traits without gender being or with diversity being the fundamental goal, but inclusion regardless of your sex, religion, etc. What do we need to be doing is, I guess, my question, right? To teach people about these skills and these
Well, I think, in my opinion, I think that we're doing some of what we need to do right now. I mean, I wish, as I already said, that we didn't have to talk about this in terms of gender. Any gender, any pronoun, any race, any ethnicity, anything. I just want the people that have the natural ability and the style of an architect to come forward, which is it. I mean, if you pay attention, and sometimes you meet people absolutely fantastic, wonderful, the best people in the world who think sequentially, who like a literal world, who want to know what next. That is not especially appropriate for architecture thinking, right? I mean, it's more of a connecting. It's more of a, I can take on a lot of, so there's a difference. I've always said this. You can do all the you can train yourself to do things, but I do believe that there's a natural thinking, there are natural tendencies to certain types of roles where people will flourish and be happy with every day, even if it's hard. And so I think that, I think I wish that we didn't have to be talking in terms of gender. I really do, although I am absolutely committed to doing that right now because we have this huge gap. And I think that we're missing a huge opportunity. But what I would, what I say at my, at Cargill right now is, we're developing training, and Whynde has participated in some of this. We're developing the proficiency models, the competency models for architects, and they're not about, do you know the cloud tools? Do you know the technologies for, database? They're about the core competencies of how an architect thinks about things, and to discover and grow and nurture those skills. I've always said, I mean, the mantra of our education is, I want to be able to see an architect coming a mile away, meaning I know that that person is going to think of something I might not have thought of because that's how they're trained. That's how their mind is trained, or they naturally occur. So what can we do? I think form has to follow function, but sometimes function has to force form, if you kept up with that. Form should follow function. In other words, what we need to do, we should build the stuff to make that happen. However, sometimes we need to force things to happen. And that's what we're doing right now. We got to force more exposure, more we have to reach this gender. We have to reach this moment because we have identified a significant gap that is making us, bad. It's just, I already established that. It's just making us not all we can be. So I think we deal with this, and then we get on to the bigger, more macro issues around non-genders. I mean, all those things I was already saying. But anyway, so I think we're doing what we need to do. We need to do more of it. We need everyone's help here to continue to call this out, call it out, focus on this, and then focus on the next layer. I don't know.
I mean, I'd agree with what you say, Linda. It's all about separating out architectural thinking from the stereotypical old white guy as the architect. And because we're getting more and more IT systems, the landscape in organizations is becoming more and more complex. We need more of that thinking. We need more architectural capability. from anywhere really. You know, 50% of the population as women is underrepresented, or 48%, whatever it is hugely underrepresented. There are other areas that are underrepresented, but I think the approach to addressing getting more women in IT is probably going to be pretty effective with other groups as well, because a lot of the barriers to entry will be similar. So if we can get a working model, I think it can then apply in other places.
I love this conversation so much because it shifts the entire focus. It focuses on what we want and what the future looks like versus what we want to stop doing or what isn't working, and focusing on the people and the diversity. As we're saying, right? It focuses on, these are the competencies. It looks like not linear, it looks non-linear in connections. It looks not hierarchical and, specifying there's only one right answer, to collaborative, right? Those are really powerful things. And as we said, we can bake them into competency models and ways of working and things like that. I do also think there is, along the way, just also addressing some of those things that can be holding back, right? The way we, create structures or workplaces and things like that, but not focusing so much on that, but really what does good look like, and working towards that, and valuing and embracing what diverse solutions and perspectives look like as we all produce that, resulting from all of our thoughts.
So one more thing I want to add, 100%. I just, after Whynde says anything, I just assume I say yes. And usually, and never but, because we usually are very aligned. But one of the things that Chris just said made me think about this. Pro tip to the women on the call here who I can't see, but well, men too. But Chris's reference to old white guys doing technology stuff, I think is really needs to sit with us for a minute and go, whether they're old white guys or not. I mean, I'm an old white woman, so I don't know. Hard for me to say. I've been in technology for decades and decades, so I don't know. But how did that happen? But here's the thing. Technology is changing. I mean, if we walk around saying this is how it is, technology, connect, or whatever it is, the world is we are opening up to stuff that is very much not that structural, right? It is made for us. It is what we're going into now with AI and with cloud and with all of the sort of ethereal stuff, right? I mean, this is how technology will be in the future. It's not on-prem data center necessarily. I mean, that may be called for sometimes, but get there, right? Get there, because if you can think in that space, you're going to leapfrog everyone who's in who's been in the profession a long time. So maybe those new opportunities of those new how we're solving problems and what we have to know, and actually to solve the problems for the future, maybe it's a spot for you. Maybe it's just maybe it's our time.
So I wanted to include a couple of there were a couple of questions that kind of linked into this. About one from Daryl that I wanted to ask first, because I thought it was very well. To Whynde's point, it was very much a future focused. When WIA is successful, what's it going to look like? What will we have? What will be there? What are orgs going to get? What are individuals? How does this? What's your vision? When WIA is really helping to grow that role and its supporters for diversity of all types, so that we stop thinking about the picture of the architect and start thinking about what the architect brings to the table. What does that look like for you,
Whynde?
I think it's literally where we've already gone here, right? When we think about architecture through these traits and, producing these sort of, well-rounded and non-biased solutions and things like that, the ability to solve problems in increasingly in non-linear ways and more complex, right? I think so that's a big part of it. I also think we will have built a pipeline from, school to university. So we continually have an equal balance, right, coming in. And along with that, the perception, I think there would be a perception change that architecture is even more meaningful and relevant and cool, right? That this is actually a career that people aspire to. And that I think in our organizations, I don't want to say people respect even more, but they connect with even more, right? It resonates with them, because I think with more diverse people in architecture, we can build connections with a lot other teams, disciplines, roles, right? People of all different sorts. And I mean, just for WIA Global, what we've always said, actually from our very first meeting, we said, you know what, when we've really succeeded, there will be no more WIA, because we won't need it, right? We will have made that change, right? So Linda, Chris,
Or maybe
thoughts?
we morph into something which is more of a
A book
supporting
club,
anyone
no?
who wants to go on the architecture
Yeah,
journey.
yeah.
No, I agree with everything you said. I think that, when something kind of arrives, it's when it's not needed anymore, right? And I don't know what the right mix is. I don't know what the goal would be. It's just that the expectation, or the whatever's happening out there with the barriers, we just don't feel them anymore. And that's and I think an acknowledgement, not just through the university, but we do understand architecture as something that, there's, I believe in apprenticeships and mentorships, and bringing people along, because people that don't have any years of organizational experience have they have to learn some things in order to get those connections to be made. And it's not a book learning type of thing, despite my you know respect for the BizBach and Paul's work and everyone else's written materials. It's there's a very strong practical aspect to this, and real experience. And human relationships and maturity. So it doesn't stop. I mean, yes, we have to get to university, and then how is it brought along into the world, into the work world? And I think that that's when it will be, when it's one of those roles, when it's understood that it's absolutely necessary, it's absolutely valuable. If we don't have it, we're not as good, and that we need to nurture it.
What specific programs can we run to get to this place? What can we do for organizations today to help them? What can we do for for other parties of interest? How can we start making this impact today and help people that want to achieve it? Either women that want to become architects. There's one in the Q&A that said she just stopped submitting resumes because it required 10 years of deep IT domain knowledge. And there's others that say that the culture, rejects them as an architect. So what are some specific things that we is doing today to help resonate with the audience, and that they could take to their organizations to ask for support in this goal?
So, and Linda, maybe I'll let you talk about maybe coaching and mentoring, because that's something that you're doing with WIA. But I think that's a big part of it too, is coaching, mentoring, and that's architecture based, as well as some of the self-confidence and just career path. And so I think that's a very broad spectrum there. Maybe the other part that I'll talk about is just the programming or the value around, sounds basic, but having conversation, right? Having conversations like these, having conversations in communities, having conversations among architecture teams to normalize it, to bring these things up. As I have these conversations with team, there's a real, wow, we really have not that many women. What are things we could do? So just activating people's own passion and care about this, and their own ideation on how to change it on their teams, and really being deliberate about that. And then as part of that, I think we are also saying some of the things we're talking about here. If you're doing it well, what does it look like? And what are the benefits of working towards that? So just all that stuff around conversation, awareness, education, and normalization.
Just the fact
Yeah.
that, yeah, there are quite a lot of women architects, although you might not see them. They are out there, they do exist, and they are successful. And, you know, by passing on information and their lessons in architecture, perhaps that can help other people who are interested find out if it is a career for them.
Chris, that's
Yeah,
a
one of
big thing, actually. Oh, sorry, Linda, just before,
no,
because I
you
know
go
you have a lot
ahead.
to share.
You go ahead.
That is a big focus for WIA, especially in this season, that we've tried to give visibility and platform to women. So just as you're saying, Chris, you know, see her to be her, like seeing how much is already done, helping people to see role models, helping to see what's possible. How do women show up in these roles? And giving them a place to spotlight them, get out there, try thought leadership, and really just making sure the world can benefit from all these perspectives in a conference like this one and embedded in many others. Over to you, Linda. Sorry. Yeah.
No, terrific. I think that just to take a turn at it, we as part of WIA, one of the things that so we are trying to understand what you all need. And what would be the highest, you know, olives are busy, but all that, right? But so we really have to pick the things that we can focus on as a priority that will make the biggest difference, right? And one of the things that we've determined is that one of those things is coaching circles. And we're thinking that we're going to launch these circles, groups, cohorts, and pair leading female architects or leading architects that have a commitment to women in architecture, and bring it along, bring groups along in coaching. And we are committed to doing that. We're starting to do that. If you haven't heard about it yet, we need to make sure you're hearing about it. But part of it is going to be you seeking and us providing. You know, I've been a community builder for a long time. There are communities around all over the place. Like I will say the Twin Cities Business Architecture Forum has been around since 2009. I started that. Now it's business architecture focused, but it's a very present thing to do. If you want to either join virtually a meeting or show up and they happen to be in Minneapolis, where I am, go and connect, reach out. You have to be a little bit active in this. I mean, we have a hard time when we're making communities. We'll build stuff, and we can push it as hard as we can push it. I think we push resources, references, our availability, our attention, mentorship, individual or through coaching circles. I think that there's a lot of things that and everyone should just read Whynde's book for sure, The Strategy to Reality, all day long. But there are things you can do and things you can learn about. We're having a summit in early December in Minneapolis, but also virtually, that you'll hear about, you know, how to be a practitioner of architecture. If you're just interested, then you should come. And so we can continue to push that information, but I'm asking you to also pull. You need to come and find and help us, because as in any community that we're trying to build, or any movement, because this is a community, but this is a movement, right? And that movement requires both the demand and the supply.
So I'm just checking the QA panel to make sure that we get any questions answered. Yes, I think that was a definite yes to the question about more mentorships and coaching circles as we go forward. I wanted to get a chance for you to talk about the type of for you, what is architecture? It's like the age-old question, what is architecture? And I really think a nice diversity on the panel of backgrounds and where you came to architecture from, as well as your kind of role in industry. And I'd love to hear for people to hear about you just briefly as an architect, not as a woman architect, but as an architect, and how you approach architecture and what you see are the most important things going forward for women or anyone in the field. Because I think that is the point of this conference, is all of our speakers are amazing architects that happen to be women. And then we'll round out with a sort of what's the practical next steps for anybody who's wants to get more involved as we move on to the next talks. So again, I think we'll just I'll open that up to the panel, but we could go around and tell us just briefly architecture and how you got to it.
You know, it's an easy story to tell when you're just telling the truth, right? So here's where I went. So, and people talk, I find it so fascinating that people get hung up on the technology side of this, like Chris was saying. And I'm sorry, my light has shifted, so I'm like in the shadows now, but I can't get up and turn on the bigger light. So, but I don't have a technology. I didn't go to college for technology. I have 3 bachelor's degrees out of my initial undergraduate days: English, economics, and business. And so, and I have a minor in music. I mean, liberal arts all the way, right? And that is, and I don't know what I intended to do with that. That, you know, what that was back in the day, right? But when computing, so I moved into IT for my communication skills. I was there when we started a group called Business Analysis, and that's that, and we were technology partners is the group that I led early on when I worked in a big company, Prudential, and had a lot of opportunity to explore stuff, or actually was volunteered a lot of stuff. Actually, is how it happened. But so that, again, don't get hung up on the technology. You can learn that because you're smart. You know, you can learn technology. You can get those through, you know, you can do that through books. You can do that through classes. You can get that through Paul. You can do a lot of stuff there, but it's the other skills. It's your fundamental way of thinking, and your communication, and your consultative style, and those kind of things. So my career started not in technology, moved to technology when like through coincidence. And one of the things I've always done in my whole career is embraced opportunities as they showed up. I didn't honestly ever really have a where do you want to be in 5 years or 10 years. I just embraced the opportunities that made sense for me, and made sense, and felt like I could learn something. Learning, inquisitiveness is essential. This is an essential part of this role. The asking why. I mean, look up Simon Sinek, right? I mean, that is a key characteristic, and something not only for architects, but will make you successful in your life and career, is understanding the why you do something, and not just the thing you're doing. And so anyway, I went from that, I got into technology, and then I got into database. I got into data. I got my first architecture role, my first certification in architecture was data architecture. It made sense to me. Hierarchical, that makes sense. Things connect, right? How does everything relate? Normalization and keys and making connections. And then I got into EA. Then I was a CIO for a state government, and I had architecture as part of that. But all those skills really supported the leadership I needed to be able to manage legislature and executive branch, right? It was weird but fascinating. Then I left there and I became a consultant because I can do anything with core
And I'm going to have
architecture
to rush you
skills.
along, Linda,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Whynde's got a
So
hard
anyway,
stop.
now here I am. So consultant, teacher, writer, now doing chief architect for Cargill, and also business architecture.
Love it.
Diversity of opportunity. That's the thing, is take those opportunities.
That's right. Maybe I'll just say, so from the overall sort of architecture, how I look at architecture, what is architecture perspective? I really emphasize 3 things in my practice. And one is the macro level design of an organization and the power of that business and technology environment. The leverage of holistic information for decision making in more expansive ways than we have without architecture, anything from sustainability to cost to investment to risk to so on. And then also the idea of how do organizations better translate strategy into execution, with architecture really being that bridge and able to harmonize massive change across organizations at scale. And so how I got into that, again, a little bit similar, opportunistic, Whynde, as you said, I'm a science person, right? Biology, chemistry, sustainability are my degrees. So I was doing data, got into architecture with an accidental 3-month temporary job, which became a practice that I grew and led to 100 architects working for me on transformation to what has really become a life's work. So anything possible. And as with the rest of us here, just a lot of passion for what's possible here. Yeah.
Have I got time to speak, or if we
You do.
Absolutely.
You got it. Get it in, Chris. I will make that the last word.
Yeah.
So basically, I got into IT by accident. I found I liked it. I was a developer on mainframe platform. Then I was moved into what was called like the technical team, and we wrote software that ran the programs and did all sorts of detailed stuff. But we did the whole thing, so we were full stack in that space. So we did the design, the requirements of design, the testing, deployment into live, which was great. And then they wanted a solution which was like a new facility in the organization I was working in, a new product, exactly. Sorry. And that involved taking data from the mainframe, the ICL mainframe, moving it to a tandem non-stop, and then writing a PC package based around X400. It was that long ago. And they asked me to do the design for this. Somebody had come up with something, and I said, no, that we don't need to do it that, do it this way. And I realized that was actually the first sort of what I would call architecture I did, because it was understanding where the pros and cons, what were the advantages of different platforms performing different functional, hosting different functional components of that solution, end-to-end solution. And then just grew from there, really, kept on doing different architecture roles. I didn't have the job title architect because we didn't have them in the organization. And then they introduced them, and suddenly I was a solution architect. There you go, like magic.
Thank you so much to all of our panel for joining us for this talk. I really appreciate your expertise, your volunteer, your tireless leadership in something that is a very important topic and will continue to be. Look forward to hearing from Whynde so much more and seeing the growth over the next year. And congratulations on the launch in Australia. So just a shout out for the amazing success of Whynde Australia recently. So you see more of that on LinkedIn and on our website. That's the womeninarchitecture.org. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Great to be
and
with
thanks
you.
to everyone.